On this episode of New York Originals, we discover a piece of your grandparents' Lower East Side that's still serving New Yorkers. We find a 1960s hobby alive and well in Brooklyn. Then tour New York City's only metal foundry in Greenwich Village, of all places. And in Chelsea, get ready to roll a few cigars, Dominican style. All that and more right now on New York Originals. New Yorkers know their city is no heartless metropolis, that this town is the ultimate small town made up of a patchwork of neighborhoods, each with its own personality and flavor. A city where people still shop at the corner mom and pop store, not just for convenience, but loyalty and quality. But like the rest of America, chain stores have invaded New York City, threatening to homogenize it. Still, many mom and pops hold on, even thrive. I'm Jamie McDonald. Join me as we celebrate small businesses that make New York so unique. These New York Originals. Few people have ever heard of an appetizing store, which is kind of surprising, considering they were almost as common in New York City as the corner deli. Luckily for us, a few of them survive, including this one, the quintessential appetizing store, Russ & Daughters. Russ & Daughters' storefront is almost a beacon from a world long ago. It is one of the last vestiges of the Lower East Side when it was an immigrant ghetto, not the trendy hotspot it has now become.
New York has always been about going to the specialty shops, so it makes it that much more special.
So just what is an appetizing store?
An appetizing store, simply put, is the place you go to get anything you would possibly want to put on a bagel. Smoked salmon, smoked fish, cream cheeses, spreads, herring. Appetizing is a sister food tradition to delicatessen. It stems from the Jewish dietary laws, which prohibit meat and dairy from being eaten or purchased together.
Russ & Daughters has been at this location since the 1920s. It began like many Lower East Side shops did, on a pushcart.
Russ & Daughters was started by my great-grandfather, Joel Russ, in 1908. He had a pushcart right around the corner on Orchard Street.
Mr. Russ was quite the innovator, even if so reluctantly.
As the business grew, he needed help. He had no sons, but he did have 3 charming daughters, and he basically roped them in. They were cheap labor. But down the road, he changed the name of the business to Russ & Daughters, and this is the first business in the country to bear the name & Daughters, to recognize a women's participation in running a business. It was quite controversial at the time, and people would stop them on the street and be perplexed, if not somewhat offended. Like, why would you name a business & Daughters? This is, you know, the easiest way to put yourself out of work. I'd like to think that my great-grandfather was a pioneering feminist, but I think, honestly, if he had had sons, it would have been Russ and Sons.
Mr. Russ would probably be pleasantly surprised at how little has changed in his shop.
Nothing can compare to food that is prepared with a 100-year-old tradition. Some of these recipes go back to my great-grandfather's time. And we have upheld the quality, the artisanal production of most of these foods.
And their smoked salmon is particularly fussed over.
It's just better. It's fresher. They know how to cut it. It's not frozen. It's fresh. It's delicious. It just is. And my dad tried to get it in Jersey. Can't get it. Can't get it. And he asked me to come here especially. And I love doing it. I always get a little bit for myself.
You come into Russ & Daughters and you can taste 8 different kinds. Each one is going to have its own unique flavor, palette, and texture, and its own story.
Cutting the fish wafer thin is an art form in itself, requiring the skill of a surgeon's touch.
It should be so thin, they should be able to read the newspaper through it. You can almost see my face through it. It's like translucent. Now, when the salmon is cut very thinly, it actually allows you to taste it better. that the
Even Russ and Daughter's
lasting taste of
bagels are more New York than
came as a
most.
result of
Authentic New York bagel is smaller, it has a firmer crust and a little less dough. So you really taste what's inside, what you're putting on the bread. And then for more fancy or special occasions, we are one of the premier purveyors of caviar. Oh, and then I'm forgetting the sweet side. There's a whole sweet side with classic, Lower East Side sweets, things that people grew up with, like babka, rugala, black and whites.
Now that Russ and Daughter's next generation is firmly in place, they understand this is about more than just carrying on a family name.
It took me a long time to realize that, in fact, being a part of the fourth generation of a 100-year-old legacy, it was really a gift. I was at a party. Lou Reed happened to be there. And I had brought some smoked salmon, of course, as hors d'oeuvres. And he apparently was, loving the salmon. And someone mentioned to him that I was also at this party. And he came straight over to me and introduced himself and said, I really want to meet you. You're New York royalty. And of course, my jaw dropped and thought, Lou Reed? No, you're New York royalty. And of course, he didn't know me, and I'm not royalty, but it made me see how important this place is to so many people.
The importance of the small business in our society is like no other. And to be able to continue that tradition and to run my family business and keep it thriving next to the Whole Foods and all these other big, huge stores in New York especially is very important to me. People come in here and say, why don't you carry me? Why don't you carry this? Why don't you do all these other things? We don't know that stuff. We've been doing this for 4 generations. And this is what we know, and we're going to stick to it. We love what we do, and we're happy to do it. And it's our passion for what we do, I think, is really what keeps it going.
Now, just because Russ and Daughters is an old world shop doesn't mean they don't know how to take advantage of modern technology. They have an online store, and they're able to ship across the country.